Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Elizabeth, and today I will be taking you on the session completing our AWS workshop with CDK. I don't know if you're joining us for the first time or if you've been here before, but we have been working on deploying infrastructure in the AWS cloud environment. And some things we have done include deploying infrastructure via AWS console, deploying via AWS CLI, and last week, we started 2 weeks ago actually, working with CDK. So today we'll be completing an entire project, fingers crossed because of time, but we'll be completing an entire project starting from our bare empty CDK app, looking at the architecture and then translating it to code. We are using TypeScript, but you are free to use any of the other supported languages for your CDK app. This includes like Java, Go, Python. I mean, you can use any of the languages that you're interested in. So let's get started. This is the workshop that we will be implementing with CDK. It's the same one that we deployed in console and also the CLI. And I think it's a good exercise for us to try it out also in CDK. A quick walkthrough of it again. We have our AWS environment, like it's just the entire AWS infrastructure worldwide. We have the region where our application is going to be deployed, two availability zones. You can see the dotted lines where my cursor is. Then there's the purple rectangle that represents our VPC. You can have multiple VPCs in your AWS environment. And our subnets, two public subnets, two private subnets, one NAT gateway, each in each subnet, in each public subnet actually, and one application load balancer with its own security group, one web server with its own security group. We have a VPC endpoint to connect to S3, and we also have our internet gateway. So this is all we will be deploying using CDK. Yes, let's get started. I have two links open here, but I think we would come back to it when we have gone far in our application deployment or when we are done with it. But we'll get started with this one. And starting with your terminal, pull up your terminal, navigate to wherever you want to have your project created. And the first thing I would do is to create the empty folder and navigate to the directory, like the folder that we just create. We can name our application website. I don't know, that's not very cool, but yes, I'll name my application website. I don't have any cool name for it. So I would say make directory website and change directory websites. So these commands, you can run them separately, but I will just run them together. Now I'm inside the website directory, and I will be initializing it as an empty, like it's an empty CDK application, right? It's an empty folder right now, but I'll initialize it as an empty CDK app. You have to run this command inside an empty directory. That's how we did it in our original CDK tutorial that we followed. And if you try to run it inside a folder that is not empty, CDK will give you the error warning that you need to run it inside an empty. So this folder we are in right now is your CDK app. Just know that. So we're initializing it, CDK init app, and the language would be TypeScript. I also want to name it website. I mean, why not? So here we have it running. Okay. So you may be getting this notice also. If you haven't used CDK recently, you'll be getting this notice. This is just a notice about the CDK library stuff. I'm going to stop seeing this notice. So I'm going to copy this CDK, acknowledge this notice. If I run it, we won't be seeing all this bogus thing again. Read it. You should if you haven't, but I've already read it. Here, CDK acknowledge. I'm just going to put that. Okay. Now I'm going to run this code dot command to open my VS Code editor in this directory. If you're not using VS Code, this command is not going to work for you, but you can open your editor in whichever application you're using. Open your folder in the editor and we can continue together. So here is my VS Code and this is what we have created. Okay. Here we can see in the bin folder, you can see like the entry to your website stack, or not just the website stack. You can register other stacks here, but this is entry to your entire CDK app. As you can see here, the app is defined, and in your lib folder, we can see the stack. We only have one stack and it's empty. It's also called website stack. So it's the name that we chose for our app that it's reusing everywhere. Even if you check your package.json, you see website here, website, everything's website. So whatever you name it, it's going to really go with it like a lot everywhere. Website. All right. Now getting started with our application development. We are going to translate this architecture into TypeScript code and have it deployed to the AWS environment. Firstly, I am going to log into the console just so we see what I currently have here. Poof. Every time I'm surprised that I remember this password because every time I think I'm going to forget it, but I haven't. Not yet. All right. So first thing we're going to do, let's just check my environment is actually empty. It should be, apart from the default stuff, I guess. Yeah, I have my default VPC, the default root table, default everything. Default security group, default. So my account is empty. I hope yours is too. If it's not, you need to delete things that you're not using so that you won't be charged any cost. But yes, I have everything empty here. And now I will be going back here to configure the website stack. So we are going to have only one stack in our deployment. It can get more complex as you go on building like more complex CDK applications. You may need multiple stacks, but for us, we only need one stack for this deployment. Everything we're deploying here, they need to work closely together. They're not different logical units, and you don't want to separate them. The web server is connected to the application load balancer, is connected to the VPC endpoint, the NAT gateway. Like everything here, you really want them working together. So it's okay for you to have them in one deployment stack. Okay? And I mentioned that I have these links open here. I'll also share them in the recap for the week. You can always see that on dev.to on my page. But some best practices here that you would want to familiarize yourself with have to do with how you deploy your AWS CDK applications, coding best practices, and the things you want to do to make sure it aligns with your, being well architected in the cloud and all that. But there's a part that I want to show you before we continue. Yes, this part, model with constructs, deploy with stacks. Depending on your background in computer science or tech, you may be familiar with the word modeling. But essentially, you want to model your infrastructure using constructs. But know that you are going to be deploying in stacks. Like everything you write in a particular stack is going to be deployed together once you run that stack. So you can have multiple constructs like together in one stack to be deployed. You can have your custom constructs deployed in your stack, but what you are going to be modeling is your constructs, like designing your constructs to look the way you want your application interaction to look like. But we're going to be deploying in stacks. You can read into everything so much more, but essentially you just familiarize yourself with everything here. Everything here. It's just good to know. You don't have to always remember everything you read it once, but you can always reference it when you want to do something and you're not sure the best way to do it. All right, now we continue from our architecture. So I like us to go from the outside inwards. Okay, so first thing here we have our region where we're going to be deploying our application, and then we'll keep going from there. So where do we configure our region? Where do we set the region we want everything here to be deployed in? It's in this entry point to our stack that we deploy, that we set it. If you remember from last week, we actually discussed all these different points, but the comments here tell you different ways you can configure the environment you want your stack to be deployed. For us, we are going to be using this. Come in, let me open it now so that you can see very well. Okay, I guess you can see now. So for us, we won't be using this because I mean they're telling us, okay, if you leave it empty, you're able to deploy the stack anywhere. No, we want to be sure we're deploying it where we are configuring it to be deployed. This one says, okay, it's going to use the default CDK account wherever we are deploying it. I don't have CDK default accounts configured, but I think it should be configured. But I'm not leaving it to chance. So I am going to be specifying this env where I set the account ID and the region. This is where we define the region our stack is to be deployed in. So I'm going to be setting this. Let me just remove all these extra comments. And then we're good to go. So our region, I'm using EU Central 1. And the AWS account, you can find it if you log into your account and check here, you can find it. You can also run AWS STS get caller identity in your terminal, and you will get all the details for your current logged in user in your CLI. So the account ID, I'm updating it here. And like this, we have configured the region for our stack deployment. Now, after selecting the region, the next thing we have is, you can see I'm skipping the Amazon S3 bucket for now. I can create it right now, yes, but I want us to work on the VPC. So the Amazon S3 bucket is outside our own region or virtual private cloud setup and all that, because S3 is a global service. Like Amazon S3 bucket, if you check the URL and all that, it's not usually particular to one region. That's why your Amazon S3 bucket names are meant to be what they call this thing, it's meant to be unique globally. So if I have a bucket named Adioto in my account, you cannot have a bucket named Adioto in your own account anywhere else in the world. Isn't that beautiful? No, it's not. It makes things more difficult for me, actually. Yeah, so we're going to be continuing with our VPC. So we're going to be creating a VPC, and our VPC is going to have 2 availability zones and all the subnets deployed inside it. So let's get started with that. And I think also it's good to open your documentation just for reference. If you, let me just have it open here, AWS CDK v2 documentation. So this is the reference documentation, and let me see, which one should I pick? Yeah, this is it. So the AWS CDK reference documentation is very good for you. You will see all the comments in your code as you have, because it's, let me see if you can see what I'm saying here. Yes, as I'm typing or like hover over this, you should be able to see. Let me see. Like you'll be able to see some details about stack and all the things when you're working in the editor, if you have, I think, the plugins installed and all that. But best is for you to also have your CDK reference documentation, especially if you're working in CDK for the first time. Your API reference is very, very detailed. You can see all the services and it will tell you all the things that you want to set or not set for it. For instance, if I open, where's the S3? Let me show you S3 buckets. This is S3. And you have the bucket construct that is already here. If we want to create our S3 bucket in TypeScript, this is how we're going to create it. There's always an example for anything you want to create, okay? You don't have to use all the details that they're writing here. We're not going to be using every single detail. We're going to be creating very, very basic things. But the main thing is you get to see all the properties that you can pass to the construct, and you also get to see, when you scroll down here, you see all the different methods that you can have in your on your construct. So just have the documentation open somewhere. We're going to be using it as we go. So the first thing I created, I mentioned, was the VPC. And if you remember, I said that the VPC is usually in the EC2. Yeah, it's usually in the EC2. EC2 is the server stuff for AWS, the server resource. This stuff is too long. I don't like how it's taking up like a lot of space. But yes, this is the EC2 module. And what we are looking for, you have many constructs here, but this is the VPC. Yep. So we're going to have our VPC created, and this is how we're going to create everything that we need. Yeah. So we can get started. EC2. First things first, we're going to be going to our lib folder in our website stack. This is the stack we're working in. You can play around, create a second stack, and also register it. You see it in your terminal when you list it. We can try our hands on that if we have extra time after we deploy this. But yeah, starting with this, I'm going to remove this because we don't need it. We're not creating a queue. And I'm also going to be removing this because we're not using that. What are we going to import? We're going to import our EC2 dependency here. We're using AWS CDK lib, but we're using the AWS EC2 part of it. Yes, so this is where we're going to be working on our VPC from. So anytime you want to deploy any resource and you check here, wherever you find it, make sure you import it. If you find it in AWS deadline, somehow come here and import AWS deadline. Like that's how it usually is. It's exactly what you see there. You come here and then you import it here and you find it. As you can see here, we're working in this EC2 here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Yeah. EC2, and then we come here and we just do AWS EC2. I imported it as EC2, so when I come here that I want to create a new VPC, yeah, so const random VPC, and it's going to be new EC2.vpc, yeah, this constructor. So everything follows the same pattern. Creating a construct, you put the scope, the ID, and the props. Scope, ID, props. That's how it always works. So that props all the variables you want to pass in as parameters or whatever. You put it in the props, and it's going to be creating that particular construct in that manner. So here the scope is this. We're creating within the scope of our website stack, and the ID I usually try to build my ID on the main ID of my stack. So if my stack is called website stack, I want my VPC to be called website stack VPC. That kind of pattern. So I always add the ID of whatever the scope here is. I'll add it and append the extra name to it. So here I'm going to have ID. That's the ID that's already passed into this scope, and then I'm adding VPC to it. And the next thing we have here is the props. So now you can see we are at the props part, and it varies per construct. So the props that we can add, like all the properties we can set for this VPC to be created in the way we want it customized to be, you can check it here to see what we have available. From the examples, you can see, oh, the props that they had in the example is the IP addresses, which is the CIDR block range. So this CIDR block, there's a way it's calculated. I'm not sure this is the right class to give it, but it's basically a calculation of how many IP addresses and which IP addresses are we provisioning ahead, are we making available for this virtual private cloud, like this VPC space. And you won't be able to use IP addresses that you haven't enabled or provisioned in your VPC. So you can always add more CIDR blocks, but the point is, it's saying this is the IP address range that we're having in this VPC. And the other example, still the same way they created the VPC. So when you come here and check all the props, these are all the things you can add. When you see question mark behind it, it means it's optional. It's optional. It's optional. Everything here is optional, 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 optional. This one, let me see what they write here. Oh, I'm not sure why they put this like this. But I think if you put this CIDR, you then don't want to put these IP addresses. I don't know where was it just now. IP addresses. But by using the IP addresses, we already have that here. If you check our VPC, I don't know, should I zoom in some more? Let me see, okay, there's no way for me to zoom in. Let me see if I can zoom in some more. It keeps zooming in, but the image is not zooming in. But yes, this image, there's the IP address range here. I don't know if you can see it because it's grayed out, but we have 10.0.0.0/16 as the CIDR block for our VPC. That's what we're going to be using. So we'll follow this example that we have here. In this VPC creation, we can see they use the IP addresses. It's the same IP address block that we have here. This is at 10.0.0/16. We're going to be using that also in our VPC. So as you can see, these are named properties. IP addresses, you put it there, and then your column, you call the ec2.ipaddresses.CIDR. There are different kind of IP addresses that you can set. We're using the CIDR block, and this is it. Okay. Next thing we have would be adding our... Okay, yes, we haven't yet done the public subnets, private subnets, availability zones, yes. So we need to do that. We also need to add our VPC endpoint for S3. We need to add the VPC endpoint for S3. So what this VPC endpoint does, if you don't know yet, is that this VPC endpoint allows everything in our VPC to communicate to Amazon S3 without having to go through the internet gateway out to the entire world and then come through the public internet. We are able to communicate with Amazon S3 within the AWS environment when we have the S3 endpoint in our VPC. So we're going to create that, and when we check the VPC construct here, we see Let me see, what do we have here? Oh, not this one. We should have the VPC endpoint in EC2 here. Okay. This interface VPC endpoint, gateway VPC endpoint. I'm looking for a VPC endpoint. Interface VPC endpoint. Now, I think we are meant to use the gateway VPC endpoint. So the gateway VPC endpoint should be for S3, yes. So I don't want to complicate this, but there are different kinds of VPC endpoints, and the different services use different kind of endpoints. For S3, we can use the gateway endpoints. You can look into it if you want to, gateway endpoint versus interface endpoint for AWS VPC, but I wouldn't be digressing into that detail right now. So the endpoint we are creating for S3 is going to be using the gateway endpoint type, and the way we are able to add it is at the point of our VPC creation. You can see here, this is the way they created new ec2.vpc, and they added it as part of the properties for our VPC. That means if we check the list of props on our VPC, we'll see gateway endpoints there. But now, when we create these endpoints, the way to specify it is when you set S3 service, you have to use this gateway VPC endpoints AWS service construct, and you mention S3. So that's how we're going to be doing this. Okay. There's also the option down here where they showed us that even after you have created the VPC, you can use the method to add a gateway endpoint to it. But of course, we're not doing that since we have this straightforward way to create it. So for our VPC, we're going to be adding another prop to it. That will be the gateway. You can see it's part of the options here, gateway endpoints. And that also is taking some props. We say S3. Let me see. No, I'm not doing this way. Let me see. S3 service dot. Yeah, this is it. Right. Okay. That would be EC2 dot. I think it was, what was the name of this? I think it was gateway endpoints. EC2 dot gateway VPC endpoint. AWS service, because we are using a predefined list of options, S3. So we have added our gateway endpoints as we are creating our VPC. And as you can see, we can always add and edit things as we want to this. So following our architecture, we have our VPC with the CIDR block that is needed, the VPC endpoints. Okay, let's check out. Okay, we also need an internet gateway for our VPC. You can see it's still part of this purple thing. So let's go back to our CDK reference here. Let's check our VPC list and see in our props. Okay, this is not it. Yeah, in our VPC. And you can see there is the Boolean option to create internet gateway is optional, but it defaults to false, I believe. I'm not sure. If I check down, I'll see what it defaults to. But yes, create internet gateway, we say yes. I mean, true. We're using true because we're using computer stuff. So true. create internet gateway. We're saying true. Okay, what else do we need for our VPC? No, not here. Wait, let me see. Availability zones. So we want to set the availability zones for our, we need 2 availability zones, 1, 2. So we'll set the availability zones for our VPC right when we're creating it. And is there anything else we want to add? We need, so all our subnet configuration and our NAT gateway subnet. So everything about our NAT gateway and subnet, we'll be doing it also here. As you can see, there is a separate one where you can create private subnets, create public subnets, but you can also define it within your VPC. So it's as if we're nesting them together. I will explain what I mean when we start working on that right away. Because as you can see in this list, this is a clickable type. All the other ones you see type number, type this, but this is type subnet selection, type NAT provider, type subnet configuration. So it's like they've already built the nested subnets constructs values inside it, and you're able to just specify it based on some configuration set here. So you can build it separately, attach it to your VPC, or we can just do it together like this. I'm going this route, okay? Now, okay, let's go. Let's see. Create internet gateway true. Let's add VPC name just because we want to. VPC name, we'll say the exact same thing we set up there. Website stack VPC. This. I wish we could check off what we've done here. So we're adding availability zone, public subnet. That's the next thing that we're doing. We go back to our reference, we come for our subnet configuration. Let's click on it and see where it takes us to. So this is what the subnet configuration looks like. How do I need to collapse this thing. How do I collapse it? Oh no. Yeah, this is much better. Oh no, exactly, this is much better. So this is what the subnet configuration looks like. This is what the subnet configuration looks like. So when you look at the VPC here, and we're looking at all these options, everything is explained here. When you scroll down, you see everything explained better here. But where's the subnet stuff I was going to show you just now? That gateway provider. Coming back to the NAT gateways, I'm looking for the subnet configuration that we were discussing just now. So this is what the subnet configuration looks like, with example here even. I'm just showing you that it's a list of individual subnet configurations like this one. This is what a subnet configuration looks like. It's something that you can define on its own. You see const, but it's nested here as something we can pass as one of the options in our props. So for us, we have 2 subnets. No, actually, 2 public subnets, 2 private subnets each. Remember, 2 public subnets, 2 private subnets each. We're going to configure it this exact same way that we have here. So we're going to use subnet configuration. We would write the CIDR mask of what we want and the subnet type, and then we're going to go with that. Okay, let us go. So subnet configuration is a list. Yes, no, this. And the first one looks like this, CIDR mask. Our CIDR mask in our architecture, we always reference this. So the CIDR mask for all of them is 20. The CIDR mask is the number behind the slash. Okay, so when we have 10.0.0.0/20, the CIDR mask is 20. And we're going to be using CIDR mask 20. Let me see what we have, the name of the subnet, and I think also the subnet type. Yeah, the name and the subnet type. So you can name it anything you want to name it. I'm going to follow the exact ones that we have here. Where is it? This one. So public subnet A, public subnet B. That's what I'm going to be naming them literally. Let me separate this a little. Okay, so 20 public subnet A, B, private subnet A. This is the subnet type. I want to explain the subnet type to you because as you can see here, you see different kind of subnet types and somehow it automatically translates. So I know you understand already, public is obvious. But what about private with egress and private isolated? This example here, where we have it, is private isolated. Private with egress allows only outward access but no internal, like no coming in. I'll show you the subnet type. Yeah, the definition is here. Isolated subnets, they don't route any traffic to the internet, no NAT gateways. The subnets that route the internet with egress but no coming in. Private with NAT, it routes to the internet with a NAT gateway but not coming in. And then we have the subnet that's connected to internet, very public. So here we have public subnets. Oh, actually, when I look at it now, it's named public subnet, but actually it looks like a private subnet with NAT because I see here now that we have the padlock sign here. So they named it public subnet because it's still going out, but it's not really going out in that sense, I guess. So we would use private with NAT for these two public subnets, but we're still naming it public subnets as usual. Okay, so it's important to really check all the details when you're interpreting your architecture. Sometimes the naming may not directly represent what the implementation is, but you need to understand the diagram and you will know what you're implementing. We can see there's a NAT gateway here. For you to have a NAT gateway here, it means that there is not like totally open, unrestricted access to the internet. It's only through the NAT gateway. So public subnet A. Let's go. Name. We have the subnet type would be, if I remember actually, is it dot subnet type dot it's like this is, I think we'll just use public because it looks like this is deprecated. We'll just use public for it. But we'll still configure the NAT gateways. So we have also, we have multiple ones. I think we can just copy instead of typing everything and we'll edit it. Interesting. So we have 4 subnets totally. Public subnet A and public subnet B. They all have the same CIDR mask. Then we have private subnet A and private subnet B. But we need to make sure the subnet type for our private subnets are private isolated. So yes, we have our VPC subnet configuration. Okay. Let me see. What else we could put in our subnets configuration? Name, subnet type, CIDR mask. Are we using IPv6? Map. So yes, everything here is all done with our subnet configuration. Okay, and we have internet gateway enabled, VPC endpoints, subnets. Aha, we haven't yet. Let's do the NAT gateway for our VPC. So in our VPC, there's the, let me see, where is it? The NAT gateways. So by default, this is what is created: one NAT gateway per availability zone or instance. We need to select whether we want a NAT gateway or a NAT instance to be created. A NAT is network address translator, that's what it means. But we haven't yet configured that. So this NAT gateway provider, we need to set the NAT provider to NAT provider.gateway. I mean, that's the default, so we don't need to do any extra things here. But if you want to explicitly add it in your code, you can add it. Nothing is going to be spoiled. But that's just it. So I'm just letting you know we're not adding it in our code, but it's because this is the default. The default is that NAT gateway is created in each availability zone, and we wouldn't need to do that privately by ourselves. So we're all set with our VPC creation and all that. The only things remaining is to create our S3 buckets and our web server application load balancer and our security groups. Really going to be able to finish on time. Okay, so yes, we have our VPC. And actually, I want to do something. I want to do an exercise. We're going to deploy this right now, and we'll keep editing, and we'll deploy, and you see that it will only just update what we've not deployed. It won't deploy multiple times. So we'll go to our, make sure you've saved everything that you edited here. Yes, and then we'll go to our terminal, and we'll run CDK. Let's start with CDK diff, so that we'll see the difference in what it's about to deploy, what we have in our console already. So this is meant to show us all the things it wants to deploy. So there's only one stack with a difference. There's only one stack we have actually. And you can see all the things that it's about to create in our environment. It's quite a lot. But the beauty is that we didn't write any of it by hand, okay? All these things, you see that, and you're wondering, some of them, we didn't write them there. It's because we're using level 2 constructs. Level 2 constructs already have some things already built in with them. So you see it's creating route table for your subnets. We didn't have to write route table. You didn't have to write routes. All these things are already defined in your subnet construct. And yes, so we can create this. We get to create this. And let's go CDK deploy. I'm saying yes to deploy everything here. And it's deploying. If we go to our environment, cloud formation, we will see our stack being deployed. That's if it's not yet done by the time I get here. Oh, it's creating progress. You can see website stack. We'll remove this. Website stack, creating progress, and you're able to see everything, the events that are happening here as they are happening. You're able to see the resources that have been created. This is our VPC, all the subnets in our VPC. Oh my god, it created 4. It's meant to be 4. It has not yet created the 4th one. Okay, I'll keep checking. You should have 4 subnets, not just. I just realized, did we specify the availability zones we want to use? You know, we only want 2 availability zones. Yes, we only want 2 availability zones. We only want 2 availability zones, but it's creating in every availability zone. Aha, you see there's an issue. It has so many subnets. We don't want so many subnets. So we're able to change this and come back and check it out. Because if I go to my console now, I'll be seeing so many subnets. We don't want that. Let me see. The VPC. Now we have 2 VPCs. See it, website stack VPC. And you see it has a lot of subnets. So it created the 4 subnets in each availability zone. That's not what we want, yes? So we're going to have to fix this, okay? Now we're going to have to go back to our code. Where is it? And we're going to set the availability zones that we want. Availability zones. No, this. Oh, I went to subnet configuration instead of. Just want to set availability zones. Is a list. If I remember correctly, it's meant to be a list. Yes, it's a string of list. So I'm going to use EU Central 1A and EU Central 1B. We have to make sure this is fixed. And here, instead of having all these 4 listed here now, we are just going to write 1 public subnet and 1 private subnet. So it's going to make sure to create this 2 subnets in each of the availability zones, kind of like multiplying it. Like one of these will have all the subnets configuration, the other one is going to have all the subnets configuration, like that. So I'll just put public subnet and private subnet, and it will figure the rest out. So after saving this, adding the availability zones, changing this and saving it, we're going to go here and we're going to run this again, CDK deploy, to show us what it wants to change, if there's any IAM role changes, and then so we're getting ready. The following resource field was the failure. Let's see. Or we can also read this better in our CDK, in our cloud formation. So, it's because we have the same configurations in the subnets. So what we can do is, instead of deploying it immediately, we can just have this stack pulled down, come in, and then we redeploy. It's still good like that. It's because we are dealing with subnets, so it's rolling it back. We'll delete the stack and then we'll redeploy it afresh. So deleting the entire stack is going to pull it down, but the thing that you can see here right now is that with your error that happened in your deployment, it will just roll back to the previous state that was working fine. If it tries to deploy something and it didn't work out fine, it will just roll back. Like anything that it tried to deploy right now, it will remove it just so that the previous state that is working fine is saved. So that's what's going on right now. It's trying to remove anything that it tried to do just now. But while we wait for this, we're going to continue our coding. When it finished running, we would pull it down and redeploy the changes that we made afresh. So we should have only 4 subnets total, not 12, like 4 in each availability zone. We want 2 in each availability zone. So that's why we changed our configuration. Next thing for us is to create our application load balancer, create our web server, and S3 buckets. We have security groups for these two, but we'll just start with S3 and then we'll round it off. So this is our VPC. I'll just close it here so it will be too big for us. Now I want to create what? S3 buckets. Remember, I have to import S3. S3 from AWS CDK /AWS S3. Yeah. This is new S3 buckets. It's because of this. Let me just say new. What I'm creating is S3 bucket anyway, so I'll just say buckets. So S3 buckets, following the same way, the same pattern I'm using. I'm naming it according to my ID. Buckets, and then we have the props. So you can see it's the same pattern we use to create VPC. This is the same pattern you're going to be using to create every construct you're adding, every item. So you're going to be following the same pattern. So buckets, I think we mainly just need the name of our buckets. So we have a prefix, or just a prefix. We just say the name, bucket's name should be. Let me see. So this is just a more bucket. It's just a simple bucket. I didn't add any special thing. We've not added any permissions or anything like that. And I'll create also the web server. So we want our, let me just say instance, new ec2 dot instance. So this instance represents a web server. I'm just putting this like placeholder commands for us. This is creating very simple versions of this. Instance name using the same pattern. So now it's still showing incomplete because there are missing properties that we need to add. We need to tell which VPC it should be created in. We need to tell the instance type and the machine image. I would go to the workshop for us to quickly check which details that we used for the EC2 instance. So we have the same configurations for our EC2 instance. So here we add source the machine image, and let's see, let me write them down first. So we need to put the VPC we want to deploy it in. That's, we can just reference the VPC we have created here directly. So it's picking up that VPC. We need to put the instance type and then also the machine image. Yes, we need to call it the instance type and also the machine image. So the machine image, I saw that just now. Yeah, Amazon Linux 2023 AMI. I'll put this one first. Just put it empty like this. I'm coming back for it. This is not what it's meant to be. But machine image equals to EC2 dot machine image dot. Are we using the latest Amazon Linux? Which one was it here? Amazon Linux 2023. I'll just use the latest Amazon Linux 2023. Or we could also say EC2 dot Amazon 2023. You can select something like this image and all that. But I'll be using this one. Dot latest Amazon Linux. This one. Now what's the issue? Okay. Let's see which one is better then. Amazon Linux 2023 AMI. We can check the CDK reference for EC2 instance here. And the machine image. Just go down. So it just here just now. It's not here. Just check it then. So this is the machine image. These are the options that we have. Let us, yeah, I think I'll just use that one still. Image that's latest. Yeah. And the instance type that we are using from our workshop is t2.micro. That's the instance type we're using. So we're going to use ec2 dot, you can see it's just following the same kind of pattern for everything. ec2 dot instance type dot I'm not sure which one this is meant to be. I'm not sure which command that's meant to be, but let's check it. I mean, that's why we're here. So instance type is meant to be of what value? Type instance type, okay, and it takes the string. Instance type of instance type instance class. This. Okay, that's what we're going to do then. T2 micro. So we're using ec2 dot instance class. We're going to build this from the instance class basically. So now dots t2 and instance size, ec2.instance size dot micro. So we have our instance type. What's the issue with you? It expects a comma after this. So I think we have our instance ready, bucket ready. What else? Our load balancer. We need to create our load balancer. So const load balancer. It's going to be new ec2, the same thing. Let me see. I think that should be, there should be a library for ALB for the load balancer, elastic load balancer. Let me check that here. Yes, elastic load balancing. So I think normally we use elastic load balancing v2. Let's see that. So we're using an application load balancer. That's what we're going to be using. Okay. So we're going with this ELBv2. Let's start. So we need to import this. Import star as ELBv2 from AWS CDK lib / ELBv2, this one. And we are saying the load balancer is going to be ELBv2 dot application load balancer, following the same kind of format. This I'm going to say the ID load balancer, and then we have our props. So as you can see, everything is coming together. We have our S3 bucket, our VPC. Now we are preparing our load balancer. We need to set the VPC for our load balancer. So VPC, let me put the name, load balancer name. I'll put the same thing from the ID. So the difference is that the ID is what identifies it inside our stack, but the name is what you see when you go and look in the list of load balancers in AWS console area, not in the stack deployment part. That's why I'm trying to put name so we can see it clearly. Load balancer name VPC would be still our existing VPC. Now this load balancer is not connected to anything, nothing is configured and all. If we want to configure it, there's so many things that we can still add. Like we can add targets to our load balancer. Like, okay, this is what we want it to be targeting. Our targets, as you can see here, all these things we're going to have to configure all the connections, but I'm not configuring connections now. The connections, you can see the direction of the arrows. You want this to go this way, you want this to go this way. That's what those connections are for. So now we're not doing any connections or access or anything yet. We're just deploying the infrastructure. And I need to deploy, we've deployed the web server, the load balancer, S3 buckets. We add the security groups, and that is it. So security groups for the load balancer. I think you can see. I think we should be able to, let me see, in the instance, in the reference for the elastic load balancer, apart from adding all these actions, I'm coming. Oh, it's not here. But I will go with EC2. Where is it? Security group should be somewhere. I need to search it. This stuff is quite. I need to search it, but I'll just come back here. Let's create this. So security group, that would be instance security group. I think it should be in the EC2 security group. Creating this, and I'm going to be naming it same way, but of course adding the SG to show it's a security group. And then as you can see, they all follow the same format. This, the name, the ID, and then the variables for that particular construct. So for our security group, we need to set the VPC. We're creating two different security groups. One also for our load balancer. That's why I copied it, so we don't have to repeat everything. I'll just say load balancer. You can type the full name. I use SG just to shorten it. And this one too is load balancer SG. So we have security groups, but we've not yet associated them with the what do you call this thing, with the instance and application load balancer. These two, I'm going to move them down here just so that we can logically see where we are creating it. I'm moving the instance and load balancer under it. It doesn't matter, I'm just doing it to visually show which one goes first. So for the instance, I'm going to add a security group. You see there's the option here to specify a security group for the instance, so that's what I want to use. So I will say instance security group as the security group here, and for the load balancer I should also be able to add security group to it, and I'll just say load balancer security group, and that's all. So we've created all the resources here. We can deploy them and see what is in our environment. So let's go and check this error that we had here. Okay, we need to pull this back. We need to pull this down. Destroy. Oh, okay, this was my this was my bucket name causing issues. It's just what did I put in my bucket name? ID bucket. Oh, because I had capital letter, I guess. I think so. Let's see, where is it? It must only contain lowercase characters, that's why. So if you also had a capital letter in your bucket name, please change it. So, oh, what's the issue now? Let me just clear this so that I can see clearly. CDK destroy. Did I save that? I think I saved it. Yeah, I did. I saved it. Yeah, I think this is still having issue because of the name of my buckets is still. So I'll remove the ID because our ID has capital letters. It will continue throwing error as long as I leave that in. So I'm removing it, and I will just write ACP test buckets. It's nothing that makes sense. It's just for the bucket name, and we are going to try it again. I think this is enough proof that I didn't try running this myself without you. So yeah, I'm deleting the stack that we have already. I'm going to be redeploying everything that we have done now afresh. and deletion is looking very good. But remember, we haven't yet configured permissions or all the other like access, like okay, our load balancer, targeting our server and all that. We haven't done that. So next week we'll be looking at permissions and configuring access or expanding our project into auto scaling and all that. So we're going to deploy this and just see that everything that we worked on is deployed. That's what our goal will be. So we're creating 2 new security groups, and these are the IAM statements that are being created, not by us but by all the configurations that we put there. Okay, let's go and look at what is going on in AWS environment. This should be gone because we deleted this VPC. Yeah, it does not exist. That was the old one we had. And this is the new one that we have. And we should only have... Okay, we have only 2 subnets. We should only have 2 subnets. I don't know why it's... Okay, we should have 4 subnets actually. 2 availability zones and 4 subnets. Maybe it's still creating in progress. Okay, yes, we now have 4 subnets, correct. We have 1 public, 1 private in each of them, correct. And let me see, it's still creating, but we can check the cloud formation. So our correction worked for our subnet creation, and we have the correct number of subnets now. This is our website stack. It is still creating in progress, but we can see what events are currently happening here. Let's see the resources that are being created. That's quite a lot. So this is the load balancer that was created. This is the instance with the resource and the instance role. Okay, everything that we're creating is working. Now, it looks like it should be done by now, or almost. Almost. Where are we at? So the instance is taking some time to get running. But this is the last thing that we are doing tonight, and once it shows that everything is fine, we are dropping off. It's been a ride. I particularly enjoy this phase of the project because it's just creating things and writing code in TypeScript, I guess. That's beautiful if you ask me. So deploying EC2 instances usually take some time to get into the running phase. Yeah. Okay, it's running now. That means we should be done or almost done. This is the website stack instance that we deployed. Remember I said that if we don't set the name, this place is going to be blank. That's why I decided to set it here. Now we have one running. Our stack should be done. Create complete. And here also we have create complete. So we have successfully deployed everything in this architecture. Everything. But we have not yet granted the proper access to where it needs to be, and we will just look into permissions next week. So we'll be looking at permissions, configuring permissions and all that next week. And I sincerely hope that you would be with us in the next session. Thank you for joining. And just one last thing, you may want to see what we have for our NAT gateways. We can look at it. Let's see in the VPC before we drop off. We didn't explicitly create a NAT gateway, but we should have. Okay, it's not here. Coming. Let me see. In our VPC. we're able to see what was created here. Network connections, internet routes on gateway endpoint to FC. Okay, so that means the NAT gateway wasn't created like I thought it would. Ordinarily it should per expected behavior, but we can explicitly also define it in our code. I mentioned it, you can experiment it by yourself in your VPC, specifying the NAT gateway type here, this NAT gateway provider, and specifying the kind of NAT gateway that you want it to be. NAT gateway provider dot gateway, and that should work. So when you try this, run it and see if your NAT gateway is deployed. Thank you for joining. I look forward to